beginning, I'm the only one in the restaurant business in my family, but all are very interested in wine and food pairing. I'm from a very political family, so we've had a lot of dinners and formal events. For me, I was always interested in going behind the scenes, what's happening behind the scenes, why are you doing this, why are you serving this beverage together with this kind of food. So it was an interest from when I was younger. Then I started working extra in the restaurant business when I was 14. But in the end, I think for me it was a friend of mine who was a sommelier. He was a bit older than me, and he introduced me to some really interesting wines. And in the end, I thought, oh, well, maybe I should learn a little bit more of that. And in the end, I just did my sommelier studies, and I'm hooked.
Started that I wanted to become a bartender, but I was actually studying lots of spirits behind what was the spirit made of, and where does it came from, and actually it started when I was buying this book about everything about beer, wine, spirits, and then I just actually started to read about wine, and it actually interested me quite much, and then I was actually buying lots of wine books, and then actually it all started, and I've been reading actively for 5 last years.
I was a hospitality student, destined to go to the US to study further, but it was my love for French language and culture that diverted me, and I chose to go to France to pursue my master's and work there and study on further, and that's how I got dragged. Well, I wouldn't say dragged, but I holistically landed into wines as a field, and I studied them there. I qualified as a sommelier, came back to India, and that was the start.
I had a really good manager in the first restaurant I was working, and she was so good to inspire me, and that actually, I got so interested and started reading myself, study tasting all the wines, and of course working in a restaurant, having it's a whole world matching wine with food, and it's always something new, and it's very inspiring having always something new to work with.
Oh yes, I remember that very distinctly. I would remember the one from my hotel, from my sommelier school, and there I was sitting there with the red wine from the Rhone Valley, and all I could tell was it was red and wine-like, and that's about it. And everybody around me was shouting every possible fruit in the basket. So from bananas to cherries to strawberries to you name the fruit, and someone in the class of 35 was shouting it. And I felt really bad because I thought I know nothing about wines. But it all turned out later that you do not find certain fruits in certain wines. But it taught me one thing, that the French were a lot more confident when talking about wine, and that's what I lacked, and I had to build that along with my education. So my first wine was a learning in confidence rather than in wines itself.
Good question. Not the quite first, but should I say like from the very first time I tasted wine at all?
Sure.
Yes, I think it was like 14. It was. I'm from the countryside in Norway, and we had this big party with all the people at my age. We had like what is it called? It was awful, and we all had the same bottle, and I think we puked all of us, all 10, for at least 2 days. But after that, I could have very good memories, of course. Yes.
The first experience was actually, I remember it quite well. It's what was that time, fresh 2006 Sauvignon Blanc from the producer Twin Islands in Marlborough in New Zealand, and I quite enjoyed it, and I started to actually... What are you doing? I enjoyed it quite well. Actually, that's where it all started, and I was actually buying more wine. I was actually enjoying quite the Sauvignon Blancs from actually all over the world. I was buying lots of Loire Valley Sauvignon Blanc, Bordeaux, and later on I experienced the Austrian Sauvignon Blancs. So actually, Sauvignon Blanc is still the grape I love at most.
I think for me, with something that I'm both enthusiastic about but also a bit skeptical is the natural part of it. Of course, I think it's good to work with natural wine in that case, that it's showing the terroir and really giving back to the land. But in the end, for me, it's the main part is what's in the bottle, because there are a lot of natural wines also coming out that are not that great in the end, because they're it's quite juicy sometimes and not really keeping themselves together because of the lack of everything else in there. So I think it's both sides of that. Otherwise, the trends, I think we're going towards going back to more classical regions, which I really like, because there's been a trend for a long time now to do everything has to be so interesting. But in the end, for me, a wine needs to be really good, and I love wine and food pairing in the end. So for me, if it works out with a wine and food pairing and it's a good quality of wine, I'm really happy.
Actually, the upcoming of for Norway, when the new world wines are actually arriving more and more and more, and the market's getting bigger for it. It is actually lots of interesting wine that you actually don't actually used with, like wine from California, you say. So the experience from wines from California is actually quite impressive for us Norwegians who actually don't know these types of wines very well. And also for Argentina, Chile, South Africa especially, people are very afraid to drink or to buy South African wine because they doesn't know it. They just think it's actually too fruity and warm wines. So it is actually quite interesting.
What's really exciting sometimes is the fact that as professionals, when we are tasting, we taste a lot of wine and a certain sense of not just palate fatigue, but regional fatigue or style fatigue sets in. And every now and then you find a wine that stands out in spite of all the other, nomenclatures and regulations and rules it has to follow. And that wine speaks to you. And when you have a good wine at €1 or €100, you don't have to write a tasting note. You're just left speechless. And it's those little moments that I search out when I taste a wine. And it sounds really pompous because a lot of people don't really get to do that, but as a sommelier, I try to get those wines and get them into a restaurant so we can share that moment with others. And at the end of it, you sell a story, you sell a passion, you don't really sell wine.
Since we're not producing, almost not any wine ourselves, we appreciate wine from all the world. So it's not just one, it's not only French, it's not only Italian, but we appreciate good wines. And it could be Austrian, it could be American, just good wine.
The Indian wine culture is primarily imported, but the Indian drinking culture is imported, which means we don't drink as a population originally. Alcohol is, or rather was, taboo in the society. So today you'll have an English-inspired, left-behind colonial drinking culture, but it's very misconstrued because we start drinking in the evening, we drink all through the evening, and then we have a very late meal, and then we go home. So we don't really have an after-dinner drinks concept or drinking with food. In fact, drinking was taboo, drinking with food, even water was considered not good for your digestion. And alcohol has always been considered bad. So that was how it was, and in the villages it might even be the same today. But what's happened now is in the big cities, people drink and people travel and they're educated abroad in the US and in the UK. So they come back and they have a certain sense of the Western culture and they try to mix it with the local. We still don't drink much with our local food, but we do eat enough pasta and other cuisines at home itself to drink alongside it.
The wine culture in Sweden, I think, is quite broad because we do not produce that much wine. So, we do produce some wine, but not too much to really find the use for it. So we import wine from all over the world, and I think in the end that really broadens our range. And the cuisine in Sweden is also quite forward. So I think we have a broad range. We see wines from all over the world. That I think is a preference of not being a wine-growing country, that we import wine from all over the world, and we have a really broad range of wine. What really works well with our food is, of course, now we're in Austria, I think with the Grüne Veltliner and the Riesling is really good with our type of cuisine. But also to have the variety of the entire world's wines actually broadens our job and makes it more fun, I think.
The wine control in Norway. Norway is not a wine-producing country, so we have particular everything of wine around the world. But Europe is actually a big market in Norway. The new world, Norwegians are actually afraid to actually try something new and stick to the old classical one. And the trends are actually German dry Riesling is actually a trend who was actually arriving to Norway for 5 years ago, and it has stayed. It's still a trend to drink German dry Riesling. And for the reds, the only thing Norwegians actually drink and can think about is actually Italian wine. Actually, Italian wine is actually a great market for Norway. But you have these two groups of wine drinking people in Norway. You have the people who's interested in wine and loves to drink wine for a good cause, a good purpose, to enjoy themselves. And you have the other group who actually just drinks wine because it is wine and goes for the most actually low quality and the cheapest wines. And actually it's divided in whites and reds, and lots of the cheap the people who actually drink the cheap wine are actually buying lots of bag-in-box, and then another is actually having more and using more money on wine.
Good question. I'd like to see Riesling because I love it, but I guess I'm a quiet person, just listen what people says, and has my own judgment without being cruel or anything. And after some days, then I pop out and be myself. But I don't know what that would be. Someone takes a little time in a glass, I guess. So yeah, why not?
I think right now, because we are in Austria, I'd kind of try and call myself a gemischtes Satz and say I'm a mixed blend, or a passe-tout grain as you find in France. So throw them all into the vat, let them do their own thing, let the yeast do it, let nature do its own thing.
A field blend.
A field blend, that's what I'd rather be right now. But I hope I grow into something that'll be age-worthy. But I'd rather command a higher price when I'm young and efficient rather than when I'm old and wrinkled. So yeah, that's about it.
What grape I would like to be, well, or what I think I am. Probably a cuvée, but if I should choose one grape, I guess I'm maybe a Californian Pinot Noir. So I'm still elegant and traditional, but I'm still a bit more fun, and I think the roundness of the fruit could be maybe a bit more of my personality. I'm more outgoing, maybe, than a French Pinot Noir.
I will be the Riesling because of the acidity. Shut off the camera, I can't tell how I discovered river monsoon.